Ladies and gentlemen, it is 12:02 p.m. Monday, March 30th, 2020. I am Master Thich Lai. I would like to extend my warmest greetings to all Vietnamese people in the country and abroad. This morning, I was very busy. However, I have some free time this afternoon, and I'd like to spend some time answering questions from Buddhist followers from everywhere. I would like to answer the questions that Buddhist followers have sent me in the past few days. Dear Master, we are a group of Buddhist followers in California. Yesterday, we followed your answers about the waves of Vietnamese media network in California that are attacking President Donald Trump and the disturbance in the social media community in the United States caused by Mother Mushroom. You had announced that you didn't want to get involved in this to create a conflict in the community. We want you to make it clear. As a spiritual leader, a person who has anti-communist forums, you have the right to critique whoever live off the Republic's support but worship the communists, so that the people in the country and overseas Vietnamese community would know. What was the reason you avoid this scandal? Master, please take a moment to tell us. We are a group of Buddhist followers who are living in the city of San Jose, Northern California. Did you know that I don't want to dig deeper into this issue when the Vietnamese media abroad have made programs to taint the reputation of President Donald Trump? When a prisoner of conscience, such as Mother Mushroom, makes statements that are not proper for a prisoner of conscience, it seems very ungrateful to this country that welcome and support her and her family. Let me speak frankly because I didn't have enough time yesterday. First of all, in the middle of April, the Vietnamese Communist Party will have an important meeting to replace existing official personnel. And according to my disciples who are present in Vietnam and working in the Communist Party regime, during this important meeting in mid-April of the Vietnamese Communist Party, they will have a change of personnel. They will hand over many important positions, including the General Secretary position. New official personnel will be running the country. These are important information that you should know. My disciples informed me of this important news that the Communist Party of Vietnam will hold a meeting in April with the presence of the senior Chinese party officials. Do you know why this meeting is important? This meeting is important because it will reciprocate the power position in the Vietnamese Communist Party, and it is taking steps to implement the Chengdu Resolution. The Chinese Communists cannot blatantly take Vietnam nation by the Chengdu Resolution because it is a secret resolution which is not internationally recognized. At the present, China aggressively wants to bring its troops into Vietnam legally by all means for controlling the Eastern Sea because of the imminent war. It was impossible for Chinese communists openly mobilize dozen divisions through the 6 northern border provinces. From these provinces, they will move to their bases in Hanoi, Saigon, from Nam Quang Pass to Cà Mau Cape to Phu Quoc and Quang Dao Islands. Chinese Communists is currently controlling Vĩnh Phu Trung, but they don't have the total control of all the lower-ranking officials. They won't win the 100 million hearts of Vietnamese people. Later on in this talk, I will discuss further. Moreover, the Chinese Communist is implementing this plan by instructing their undercover members living overseas to do something. Who will be able to cause chaos during a time like this? An event so that all anti-communist forums, all the Facebook pages and websites with anti-communist opinions will forget about the Chinese communists will meet to replace Vietnamese official personnel, and the Vietnamese forget about the Chindu resolution that will finalize by Communist Party this April. Therefore, they utilize Mother Mushroom to launch a campaign to divert public opinion. The Chinese intelligence commanded the Vietnamese communists to launch an event so that all the anti-communist forums will forget that the Chindu resolution was about to take place at the Communist Party's conference. In this conference, party members in the political ministry will be deployed. Who will have the seat of General Secretary? Who will sit in the Prime Minister's chair? All this personnel change and voting will happen under the direction of a senior officer of the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese intelligence does not want the overseas Vietnamese community and all the well-established anti-communist forums to analyze this plan. They also want everybody to forget about the outbreak of the Chinese coronavirus genociding Vietnam. This is confirmed news I received from a group of my disciples who are working in the Vietnamese government. They asked me to sound the alarm for Vietnam. Mother Mushroom is just a pawn. The chess piece was not supposed to be played yet, but because of the urgent situation, the Chinese communists did not want the anti-communist forums, Facebook, and YouTube of the Vietnamese overseas to focus on the execution of the Chindu resolution. So they want to use the pawn, Mother Mushroom, to redirect the public opinion. That is the reason that I don't want to fall into the trap of the Vietnamese and the Chinese communists. Instead, I'm focusing on the matter of the Communist Party of Vietnam meeting in April for a legal handover without being condemned by the world and is opposed by the Vietnamese people. This is my personal issue. That is my answer to the group of disciples who live in Northern California. We should focus all our minds and energy to protect our motherland. The problem of the undercover Vietnamese communist Mother Mushroom will be addressed later on. She has no chance to live in the United States because of her true status has been shown. Now, it is time for us to focus our minds on our motherland, to monitor the progress of the General Assembly meeting in April regarding the personnel changes. The senior Chinese party officers will be attending the meeting to direct this rearrangement. The reason I don't want to fall into this trap of the communists because the Vietnamese Communist Party and the Chinese Communist Party had a Chindu resolution signed on the 3rd of September, 1990. That would be 20 years this September. So now that the communists have a meeting that will take place in April, and frankly, the Chinese communists can't possibly move its troops directly into the country of Vietnam without international recognition. The secret resolution was signed by two communist parties. Vietnamese Communist Party secretly sold the country to the Chinese Communist Party. This is called a secret resolution, not a public treaty that is accepted internationally. Xi Jinping's military movement must be informed. For example, Xi Jinping can't move his troops from Guangdong and Chongqing region to the coast and prepare to attack Taiwan. When they mobilize the troops, they have to announce that they are having a military exercise. The Chinese Foreign Ministry announced at that time that it will conduct drills on a coast opposite the island nation of Taiwan. They don't want to make such a statement. If they didn't make such a statement, Taiwan would misunderstand that the Chinese Communist troops moved to invade them, and they would fire the first shot. At the moment, the Chinese Communist is very afraid of the first shot to trigger the war with Taiwan. The Chinese Communist does not want the war to happen in the mainland. They have determined that the locations of the battlefield, as I have commented in previous talks, war will take place on the battlefield of North Korea or Vietnam, Taiwan, or the South China Sea. Attacking North Korea will turn North Korea into a mad dog. It would betray, and since it already had atomic bombs, it can drop the atomic bombs, then the Chinese Communists will be tired. There is no need to attack Vietnam because whether Nguyen Phu Trong is Chinese or Vietnamese, it does not matter because he was long dead. Around the world, all the leaders of other countries work tirelessly day and night. They hold press conferences daily, such as the British Prime Minister, the President of France, the President of Germany, the President of Italy, the President of Spain, the President of Japan, the President of South Korea, and the President of the United States, Donald Trump. These leaders kept protecting their people during this coronavirus flu season, but Nguyen Phu Trong is still nowhere to be seen. Is he alive or dead? Is he Chinese or Vietnamese? You clearly see that he has no word to protect the lives and the property of the Vietnamese people. So, who is he really? You already have the answer, and there is no need for me to say. Nguyen Phu Trong is a Chinese Communist minion. However, the 4 million party members in the country are not all Chinese minions. Some of them are descendants of the senior cadres whose fathers have died on the battlefield in 1979 during the war with Chinese communists. Some of them had a feud with Chinese communists because their family members died in the battlefield on Colin Island in 1988. In the 4 million party members, there are at least 1 million party members who still have Vietnamese heart. For example, recently, Nguyễn Duc Chung is also a Vietnamese Communist Party member. He has a blood debt to the people, but he still thinks about the life and the fortune of the Hanoi people. Therefore, he asked the media to tell the truth. The situation of the coronavirus must not be hidden and must be transparent, so they will pay a very expensive consequence. That statement was announced not recently, but it was said more than 30 days ago. He said that he had to ask for permission to announce the official number of coronavirus infected and to search for 43,000 people who had been to Bach Mai Hospital because that was the infected cases. Even though Nguyen Duc Chung is a criminal of the Vietnamese nation, he still has the heart to think of the people of Hanoi. Not all the communists are cold-blooded. Some of them made a wrong choice and sided with the communists. They are riding on the back of a tiger and cannot be dismounted. The Chinese Communist knows that if it cannot control all the Vietnamese Communist Party members, it won't be able to grasp 100 million hearts of the Vietnamese people. Some of my disciples are working in the Vietnamese government. They are people involved with the Communist Party members. They say that the Chinese Communists are insane. and they want to bring their troops in as soon as possible. For the moment, they cannot bring their troops through 6 border gates without international commendation because Vietnam is still a sovereign country and has a seat on the United Nations Security Council. Therefore, the Chinese Communists want the Vietnamese Communist Party to hold a meeting in April so that they can sign a military cooperation agreement or defense cooperation. Once it is signed, the Chinese Communists can bring their troops to the territory of Vietnam and station along the coast to protect the Eastern Sea. Even though the pandemic is raging in Vietnam, the Chinese still continue to expand their military base and renovate airports on the Parcel and Spratly Islands because it was about to start a war with the United States. The United States only needed to use one of the aircraft carriers in the USS 7 fleet to level the artificial islands built by the Chinese Communists on the Spratly Islands. These artificial islands will be sunk into the ocean within 4 hours because the island is always a fixed target. For example, if the Chinese want to shoot an American aircraft carrier, they would enter the coordinates in Shanghai or Shenzhen for the intercontinental rocket to target the aircraft carrier. It can take at least 10 minutes to the target. During those 10 minutes, the aircraft carrier already moves to a different location. Aircraft carriers are not a fixed island, but Scarlet and Spratly Islands are fixed islands. Therefore, an intercontinental warhead of the United States just needs the coordinates of these Chinese military airfields on the island. Within 15 minutes, thousands of rockets will rain on the target, and these military bases will be erased from the map. So, it is very difficult to shoot the American aircraft carrier. In addition, the U.S. artificial satellites can detect the Chinese rocket and utilize the air-to-air missiles and ground-based missiles to destroy them in the air before they can reach the target. There must be military bases located in Vietnam for the Chinese Communists to protect their artificial island bases and to resupply their bases. The bases on the artificial islands are used for fighting against the United States in the Eastern Sea area. The supporting bases will be located in the Phu Quoc Island coastal area of Vũng Tàu, Da Nang, and Cam Ranh to supply the military of Chinese Communists on the Spratly and Scarlet Islands. So, at all costs, the Chinese Communists will bring more of their personnel and more people who will be inaugurated for their first term. Those will be the people of Chinese Communists. And the Vietnamese Communists will publicly announce there will be a senior officer of the Chinese Communist Party present in the meeting in April. The Communist Party of Vietnam will replace personnel from the General Secretary to the Provincial Party Committee, from the Prime Minister to the Deputy Prime Minister. A series of change will be made, and to avoid opposition, the Chinese Communists and the Vietnamese Communists will have treaties, which will help the Chinese Communists and the Vietnamese Communists to implement the legal constitutional Chengdu Treaty through these military treaties. The Vietnamese Communist Party of Vietnam won't be able to nominate any candidate. Xi Jinping will appoint his staff to take the position, and the 4 million Vietnamese Communist members vote these Chinese officials to legally create a constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, please request the Overseas Vietnamese Forums to follow the personnel change meeting of the Vietnamese Communist Party in April. Did you know that the Secretary, Tran Wook Vuong, has been running the country for months instead of the puppet General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong. All the decisions were made by Tran Wook Vuong according to U.S. and the Communist Party members. The Chinese Communists already chose Tran Wook Vuong to be the new General Secretary. And who will be the new president? I do not know yet. So I'm asking that all the overseas Vietnamese forums mentally devote and focus on the Communist Party meeting to replace personnel under the supervision of the Chinese Communists. They will have the treaty to legally send troops and station in Vietnam. There is one thing that is causing the Chinese Communists a headache. According to the latest statement from the scarecrow Nguyễn Xuân Phúc, he said that he has to feed 105 million mouths of people during this pandemic, which means that the Vietnamese population is not 95 million anymore, but is up to 105 million. The Chinese see that there are too many Vietnamese. My female disciple who is in Hong Kong and waiting for her visa to enter the United States. She has provided many important news such as a suicidal warfare bombing and about the tributes of Vietnam. These information were all validated. She also said that the reason Vietnam was ordered to not close the 6th border crossing between Vietnam and China was because Xi Jinping wanted to kill 50 million Vietnamese people in order to assimilate easily. At present in Vietnam, there are about 30 million to 50 million Chinese. The Chinese do not want Vietnam to be overpopulated because when the Vietnamese realize that the Viet Cong is selling the country to the Chinese, and they see that the Chinese army present in Saigon, Hanoi, Da Nang, and Phu Quoc, the patriotism of the Vietnamese people will emerge. There will be guerrilla attacks on the Chinese, and the Chinese Communists will suffer. The best way to eliminate Vietnamese people is ordering Nguyễn Xuân Phúc to keep the border gates open. No better way to make the Vietnamese people hungry by continuing to import Vietnamese rice and continuing to stop the water from flowing into the Mekong Delta. I now ask you to follow the meeting of the Communist Party this April in order to provide us with information. We then can inform our patriotic Vietnamese to take action before it's too late. And I make it clear that we should not take the bait of Mother Mushroom diverting public opinion. The true identity and motive of Mother Mushroom has been revealed. Mother Mushroom no longer has a chance to survive with the Vietnamese community in the United States. She can no longer deceive anyone. But why did the communists use the pawn Mother Mushroom instead of anyone else? Because they have to implement the secret Chengdu resolution. The resolution must be made public in April, legally and constitutionally. Therefore, it is impossible for the Chinese military to enter Vietnam without signing any agreement with the Vietnamese communists this April. I would like to make it clear that I put the survival issue of the Vietnamese people as priority, and I recommend that all anti-communist Vietnamese forum should focus on the Chinese communists and Vietnamese communists in the upcoming meeting. We also have to keep updating the coronavirus situation. The Wuhan virus is devastating the people of Vietnam. Doing these is better than continuing to attack President Trump or fighting back and forth on the pawn Mother Mushroom. The Chinese communists and Vietnamese communists always divert public opinion by creating stories that make the overseas Vietnamese focus on and forget about the Vietnamese communists about to hand over the country of Vietnam to China. In April, the military constitutional legalized will allow Chinese communists to station its army on our Vietnamese territory. Therefore, we have to ring the bell that the Chinese communists are instructing to kill 50 million Vietnamese as soon as possible. It is more difficult to assimilate the Vietnamese if they are too crowded. The Vietnamese people can clearly see the communist sails off the motherland and harm the people. That's the second opinion. I am going to answer another question. Dear Master, we are your Buddhist followers who live in the U.S. We live in Texas, about 2-hour drive from your Amatep village. We saw your online posting. The Chinese coronavirus kit for negative and positive were criticized in return by Spain. It was also criticized in return by England as well, because only 20% of the results were true and 80% were false. Is it fake or true news? Could you tell us how Spain, England, Germany, and the United States knew these tests have errors of 80%? Thank you, Master. We wish you good health so that after the epidemic, you will continue to lead the Amatep village system so that we can study and practice Buddhism. It is very simple. I already said that the United States does not import low-quality Chinese test kits. It took a few days for the Chinese test kits to get the results, while the U.S. test kits takes only 5 minutes. The reason for the increasing number of Chinese infections in the United States was because the tests can give the results so quickly. It only took 5 minutes, and it was equipped throughout 50 states. This number was a real number because the United States doesn't hide their numbers. Regarding Vietnamese communists, they have been telling the truth from January 21st up till now. When the people who were infected and died, the government stated that these people were suspected to be infected with the coronavirus. The government did not dare to specify because they couldn't perform any tests in the country. In February, all the people who had fever and needed to be tested for coronavirus Wuhan, their survivors were taken and transferred to China from Vietnam. The Chinese communists needed 4 days to get the results. The Chinese communists did not have enough time to take care of their own people. How can they possibly take care of Vietnam? To them, Vietnam is merely a colony or one of their provinces. So, when the Vietnamese communists said that the people died because of their fever, they were suspected of having an infection. They were telling the truth because they had nothing to check. Recently, when the U.S. gave a $37 million aiding program and the CDC sent 4 doctors to Vietnam, along with tens of thousands of test kits, the Bach Mai Hospital got overwhelmed because there were so many infected cases. The infected cases burst so much that Nguyễn Đức Trung had to tell the truth, and Lee Tân Liêm, vice president of Ho Chi Minh City, also had to say that in February, the infectious cases were 40,000. The death toll was over 1,000. Prior to that, there was nothing to process the testing samples, and it took 4 days to get the results. In addition, the Chinese test kits were not reliable. Now, back to the problem. How did people know that the Chinese test kits have 80% discrepancy? Spain imported hundreds of thousands of test kits from China for testing the Wuhan virus. Using the Chinese test kits, the Spanish doctors and nurses used them on their Spaniards. These discharged patients had negative results. However, after 10 days, these patients came back and tested again with the U.S. test kits, and the results were positive. The United States gave Spain only 500 to 1,000 test kits as samples. They gave Spain a formula to make test kits, and they didn't sell test kits. Only Korea sold the test kits. The United States gave the sample test kits and the formula to make additional test kits. After Spain tested the Chinese test kits with negative results and the US test kits yield positive results, they called back the 100 people who tested by the Chinese test kits. The US test kits indicated 80 of them were positive. In addition, people with positive tests from the US test kits received negative results with Chinese test kits. In addition, patients who were on the ventilators and waiting to pass away still got negative results with the Chinese test kits. Obviously, the Chinese Communist test kits are unreliable. I'll take one more email and I'll answer it. Master, I am a Buddhist follower who is living in Arizona. For a long time, I cannot visit you and the resident of the Amitat village in Indio because it is closed. I wonder if the Chinese communists and the Vietnamese communists already have a secret resolution of Chengdu. The Chinese communists has the right to meet the Communist Party of Vietnam to declare the secret resolution in public. They can simply declare 30 years from March 9th, 1990. Vietnam will become a Chinese province. Why did they do so? Why didn't they do so? Instead, they prolonged and had meeting after meeting for extra time. Can you please explain to me? Definitely not. If it could be done, the Vietnamese and the Chinese communists would have done it already. Just because the Chinese hold the reign of Nguyễn Phú Trọng and some of the generals does not mean that the Chinese can infiltrate all 60 provinces and cities of Vietnam. Even if all 4 million party members are under control by the Chinese, but in the 100 million Vietnamese people, wouldn't there be 70 million patriots? So, the Chinese communists took advantage of the countries that were attacked by the pandemic, and the United States was fighting the epidemic. Just the day before yesterday, 4 doctors from the CDC were in Vietnam to help implement the relief fund of $37 million and was recalled by the U.S. Department of State. As of now, the United States does not allow any specialists at the CDC facility to help other countries. President Donald Trump has called on all doctors to come back because saving America is top priority. And the good news is that the drug for malaria has been tested by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and is approved for public use to treat coronavirus. Why did they approve? Because the number of people recovering is very high in New York City, which was the place where corona infection raged the most. The reason why they got hit so hard is because in New York City, the number of Chinese American people are nearly 600,000. In New Jersey, the number of Chinese American is 180,000. According to U.S. statistics, the Chinese communists hid the coronavirus Wuhan from the world. So from December of lunar calendar, which is around January 23rd, 2020, a few 100,000 New Yorkers went to China for the Lunar New Year and returned to the United States after that. They are Chinese people, but they grew up in New York, and they have a U.S. passport. Their bloodline is from their Chinese ancestors. The U.S. had its first closure in January because President Donald Trump does not allow all Chinese to enter the United States, but cannot prohibit Chinese Americans who have the United States passport. That is the reason New York City's outbreak is overwhelming. Prior to trials of malaria drugs, the number of people recovering without medical treatment was 900. After the approval by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the recovery number today has increased to 4,767 people who have been cured and recovered. So the United States Food and Drug Administration has approved and licensed doctors have prescribed. The number of people on ICU beds have recovered from 900 increased to 4,767. And this number continues to increase. This is good news. Currently, the U.S. is utilizing all of its resources and knowledge to stop this pandemic. Meanwhile, the Chinese communists took advantage of the U.S. and the world were under a pandemic, so they asked the Vietnamese henchmen to meet in April to hand over the country of Vietnam through agreement. They will legally bring troops into the country. They will also have their staff to run the country of Vietnam. We must pay attention. However, their actions cannot be hidden through the eyes of the overseas Vietnamese community and not through the eyes of the Vietnamese people in the country. Therefore, the question from the Buddhist followers asking why the Chinese Communist doesn't reveal the secret resolution in public. If it could be done, it would be done already. The Chinese Communists cannot abandon the Eastern Sea. To protect the Eastern Sea, they must have a permanent army in the territory of Vietnam, because Vietnam has a coastal length over 2,000 kilometers to protect the South China Sea. The USS 7th Fleet are in the South China Sea. China wants to fight with the United States. This is a war that is impossible to win. But what is the reason to fight? The Chinese people have long been brainwashed by the Communist Party. The Chinese government has poisoned the minds of their people. So when the Chinese saw that more than 100,000 Americans were infected, they hung banners to celebrate. Currently, the domestic rebellions are happening in China. Hubei province fights with Jiangxi province. Shanghai fights with Shanghai, and they all disobey Beijing's orders. It is happening every hour and every minute, and the Chinese Communists does not want war to happen in their own country. They prefer to bring the war to a foreign country. But fighting Vietnam was not beneficial because fighting Vietnam would cause more chaos. The border gates will be at war, and the Chinese civilians cannot carry suicidal bombs into Vietnam to eliminate the 50 million Vietnamese people. Fighting Vietnam would stop Nguyen Dung Phúc from paying tribute to China with rice. Tributes with rice and receiving Chinese money, which has no value at all. China desperately needs Vietnam's oil fields, and they have been buying crude oil from Vietnam. With the treaty, Vietnam can legally sell off its 2 Chin Islands to the Chinese Communists. Once that is done, China can pump the fossil fuel oil freely. Soon after that, the Chinese Communist troops can station in Phu Quoc, Can Đảo, and Da Nang without implementing the Chindu resolution. So once again, they cannot complete the secret resolution in open because the Chinese people will protest. And those military commanders who did not want to be Chinese minions would coup and obstruct the Chinese Communists. Therefore, the Chinese Communists will take over Vietnam by military agreement, export agreements, and trading agreements. This way, Vietnam will feed its people through its hunger. Therefore, they have to kill the Vietnamese people as soon as possible. The Chinese Communists could not implement the secret Chindu resolution openly. It wouldn't use the meeting in April to complete the selling of the Vietnamese territory and to bring the Chinese troops into Vietnam. Now you can clearly see why the United States brought 7 aircraft carriers into the South China Sea. It is because the United States knew that the Chinese Communist is a mad dog. Their provinces are about to coup, so Chinese Communists wants to have a war. Prior to the corona pandemic, it was not possible to win the war with the United States. Now that the Chinese Communists have so hatred with all many nations that have atomic weapons in the world, they make enemies with England, Germany, France, and the United States. The life and property of the people in the United States are the priority. You should remember that the President of the United States, Donald Trump, was elected by the people. President Trump became president not by robbing the government, but by the people electing him. The Prime Minister of Britain was elected by English people. Therefore, the life of English people is also top priority. The Italian people, the Italian president, was also elected by his own people, meaning the life of the Italians is more valuable than the trade pact with the Chinese Communists. And the Chinese Communists knows the situation very well. They will not attack Vietnam by force. During the meeting in April, they will replace the Vietnamese officials with their own staff. No one could condemn the Chinese with military cooperation treaties and military exercises in Vietnam. There will be many treaties, such as treaties on import and export goods. The treaty to use Chinese currents. Vietnam does not need the Ho Chi Minh currency anymore. Those are the great ways to rob Vietnam. When the Vietnamese administration is full of Chinese staff who are holding position as prime minister, industry ministers, and Chinese minions, there is no need to fight Vietnam anymore. They will use Vietnam as its logistics to support its people and export goods. They will send more infected Chinese to kill the Vietnamese. So don't worry. There are people who have said, how can the Chinese Communists kill their own people? Well, China has 1.4 billion people. It didn't do much to harm. It didn't do much to sacrifice 100 million Chinese people who are infected with the Wuhan virus to extradite the Vietnamese. Even with 100 million dead, China still are left with 1.3 billion people. Besides, it will not fight the Vietnamese army, but it will fight against the United States. Why go to fight knowing you cannot win? Fighting to turn the spirit of resentment upon Xi Jinping into hatred towards the United States. Attacking to eradicate patriotism spirit against the U.S. troops so they could no longer think of the coup attempt, Xi Jinping. Fighting the United States so that the military generals in Hubei, in Zhengzhou, in Wuhan, in Xinjiang, in Shanghai, in Guangdong, and in Guangxi will not fight against Xi Jinping. They would fight like that in the 1979 war. After 1 month of fighting, they will surrender to the United States, and Xi Jinping will go to the U.S. craft carrier to sign a surrendering treaty to pay the compensation for the war. However, the Chinese Communist Party will be held in the country won't be divided into 5 or 7 pieces. However, the Chinese communists won't live on. It must pay 21 trillion for damages due to the pandemic. Damages to the aviation industry, travel companies, clothes factories, car companies, aircraft builders couldn't produce aircrafts. From now to the day the war takes place, the Americans could die up to 10,000 people. For those were the reasons. So those were the reasons that Chinese communists have to fight. Without a war, it will die sooner. Once the U.S. can produce the vaccine for the coronavirus and the medication to stop and recover from this pandemic, President Trump will not forgive the Chinese communists, and so will the world. They will ask for compensation because China failed to warn the world about the number of infected patients in Wuhan city. The virus leakage from P4 laboratory that was informed by Dr. Li Wing Lang. The epidemic could have stopped if these information were provided properly. The Chinese communists no longer has a way to live on. However, if it fights against the United States and lose, it can hold the Communist Party a little longer. But the United States will not allow that to happen. When Chinese communists surrender, they will be forced into the terms of the United States to pay compensation. Where do they get the money to compensate? If not compensated, all U.S. companies will not invest in China. All companies from England, Germany, France, Italy, and Europe will no longer do business with Chinese communists like how they did before. Then how would it survive? Actually, the Chinese communists has tens of millions of people already dead. Video clips show tens of thousands of iPhones that were thrown away at the crematoriums. Not one crematoriums, but 14 of them. The number of people lining up to receive the remains was 70,000. There are dozens of crematoriums like that. In my opinion, the Vietnamese communists relied on Chinese communists to live. However, they will not survive when the Chinese communists are at war. And when the Chinese communists surrender to the Americans, they would be forced to sign an adverse agreement for Chinese communists due to the compensation. At the end, the Chinese communists would not have any way to return like before the day of the coronavirus pandemic spreading. That is the reason in April, the Chinese will make the Vietnamese communists sign many treaties. To the world, these treaties are for military compensation, trading, rice export, and allowing Chinese troops to station in Vietnamese territory. It's actually a legitimate way to elude 100 million people in Vietnam to get past the cadres who are serving in the Communist Party but still have the heart of Vietnam. The final solution for the problem is the Chinese communists will fight in the Eastern Sea. They will not attack Vietnam, but choose Vietnam as a military garrison. They will fire at American aircraft carriers from the coast of Da Nang, Cam Ranh, and Phu Quoc. It is a sympathy for the poor people who live in those coastal areas. Although the Chinese will not attack Vietnam, but it will station its army in Vietnam. Vietnam will also suffer very heavy damage. I say the poorest are the poor people who sell lottery tickets in Vietnam. According to the statistics of the Vietnamese Communist media, every day there are 11 billion dung profits from the lottery tickets in Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi City. As of now, Nguyễn Xuân Phúc ordered to stop all lottery immediately. It lost 11 billion every day, even though they report only 190 people are infected or sick. Why does it have to lose 11 million dong on lottery sales? Because if the lotteries are not allowed to sell, the province can't collect their money. The government won't die, but the lottery sellers will. These people live on their daily earnings. They don't have money to eat for the next day. They live on the sidewalk and underneath the bridges. The street vendors who sell the produce are miserable people. If you are in the United States and you get isolated, it means you are limited from going out. You can still go during the day but cannot go out at night. You might feel uncomfortable from midnight to 4 a.m. because you're not allowed to go outside except on special cases. However, you still have money from President Trump's administration in April, and taxpayers will have money as well. Unemployed people will have unemployment benefits. Nail salon and restaurants with damage from this ban will be compensated as well. However, in Vietnam, millions of people are living on selling lottery tickets, and there must be a feeling million people who are living off by vending on the streets. They are the ones who will die before becoming infected with the corona Wuhan virus. So you should think about these people. If we were still in Vietnam, who would be part of the lottery business? What would we do to survive this pandemic? The Vietnamese Communists just said that the people are not allowed to go anywhere but stay at home. The Vietnamese Communists just said that the people are not allowed to go anywhere, staying at home to eat and drink on the spot. So the lottery ticket sellers and people living on the sidewalks, what will they do to live and eat? In the United States, the unemployed will receive unemployment benefits. In early April, there will be checks for people who make under $80,000 a year, and couples that have children will receive $3.4 thousand. A single person will get $1,000. Businesses will have compensation. Airlines will have federal budget compensation, and the hotel industry will also get paid for its losses. So even though the United States has an epidemic, the impact is manageable. The people who are living by selling lottery tickets and tens of millions of people who sell vegetables on the streets, vendors who sleep under bridges and on the streets or on the sides of the roads. How do they get through these days? Please think a little bit of pity for the Vietnamese people. We don't know what to do to help besides praying for this pandemic to pass quickly so that the US will recover. Europe will recover. But Chinese communists cannot ever recover because the Chinese communists no longer has a foot in the international market. There are no more companies or factories that dare to invest money into doing business with Chinese communists. So the fake face has been exposed, and the Chinese Communist is a virus-producing, concealing country that spread the disease. They operate the virus suicide bomb campaign, and now giving a false pretense to provide test kits to Brazil and countries affected by this epidemic. Now people can clearly see the true face of the Chinese communists. They have no other way but only the path of death and surrender. The Western countries will ask for compensation due to the de-evaluation. When the Chinese communists die, those minions will follow the Chinese communists will die as well. Only those who stand up when the Chinese communists change their lives by surrendering, then those people will have a chance to survive. Respectfully yours. Please take some time to think about the people who sell lottery tickets, sell vegetables on the streets, street vendors who carry the Vietnamese blood. What do they do to live through this tribulation?